So hi, welcome to this presentation. During this talk, we'll talk about how you can develop web applications with Spring Framework, and especially here with Spring Boot. So we'll talk about various things, the kind of experience you can get, but also the kind of features you can leverage with the latest versions. Here we're focusing on Spring Boot 1.3 and Spring Framework 4.2. But first, let's talk about one thing. If you've been to the presentation given by Stefan, have you been to the presentation given by Stefan, by the way? Yeah. So I'll talk about briefly. So in Spring Boot, there's a feature that's called externalized configuration, and in a way, that's providing you a way to configure your application inside application.properties or application.yaml files without doing things manually or programmatically. And the thing is, the Spring Boot team has defined a lot of keys for you to configure, for example, the port your server is running on, or your data source, etc., etc. There are a lot of keys that you can just use and set the values you want to configure things easily instead of doing things yourself. But the thing is, there are so many keys defined. One more thing, when you're using those keys, you get auto-completion in your IDE, because the Spring Boot team is providing all that data as metadata files that any tool can consume, being an IDE like IntelliJ or NetBeans or Eclipse STS or anything else. So that's the kind of experience you can have in your IDE. But to provide all that, like I said, the Spring Boot team has to provide all those metadata somewhere. And like anything, you need to manage it, because whenever you change the name of the key, or you deprecate something, or there's something new, you need to somehow manage the lifecycle of all those properties. Otherwise, it's just confusing. So previously, what the Spring Boot team was doing and still doing is providing a changelog for each version. So that key, which configures the session timeout, for example, it was replaced by something else, or it was changed, or it was deleted, why, etc. So you get a full view of what's happening between versions. But to provide that was kind of a tedious work to do manually. So that's why the Spring Boot team created an internal library for them to manage all this. And between two versions of Boot, you can manage to get the diff of everything that's changed property-wise in Boot. So that's kind of meta, but that library, what it's doing, it's loading the Maven artifacts for example, Spring Boot 1.2.5 and 1.3.0, loading those jars, picking into those jars, looking at the metadata, generating a diff, and from here we'll take that library from here, and what we'll do during that talk is work on some kind of web UI to display that information quite nicely. So everything, there'll be the slides on the conference website. Everything here is actually a shorter version of a long university where there's a lot of features demoed. So if you want to see the code, it's on GitHub, and there's also a longer version of the slides. So the interesting part about the code, there's a commit by commit history of what we're doing with that project. So whatever I'm doing right now, you'll see it commit by commit and explained. So it's quite clear. So that's the end of the slideware, and right now we'll focus on the application. So what we can show right now is, for example, a kind of output, the kind of output you can have from that library. So this is a sample class, a sample application I've got into a project. And just to show you, it's loading right now the jars, and it's showing some kind of ASCII doc textual version of what we expect. So in a group, for example, Spring Resources Chain, you've got So in the group Spring Resources Chain, you've got that key enabled, which has been added, and that key is doing this. So that's what kind of data we're going to deal with during that presentation. So right now, what we have is an actual application. yeah, let's go. So if I launch that application, it's a Spring Boot app, and okay, that's the basic application. It's already being done. So I'll show you what it does. If you type, I want to see the differences between 125 and 130. It's loading, and then it's rendering a page of all the differences between the keys of those two versions. So obviously it's loading things from Maven Central. Good. So you've got a here. So we've got the differences in displayed in the table with everything in the red that's been deleted, green created, etc., etc. We've got all those keys displayed. So as you can see, there are some groups where nothing changed recently, but they're still displayed, and we'll do something about it later. But what I want to show you is also the layout of that application. So if you take a look at the layout right now, so there's the config diff module, which is the library we're using to generate that data. But the web application we are looking at right now is a simple boot application with the application class, which is launching the whole thing. We've got controllers, web MVC controllers, we've got services, and we've got also POJOs to deal with our data. Because it's a boot application, we also have things into our resources folder, being static resources, our application.properties file, we'll talk about it, and also templates, because here we're using a template engine. So this is the kind of layout and experience we have so far. And what I want to show you right now is that previously, when you're working with a web application, what you have to do is you have to change something, being into CSS or templates or in a classic controller or somewhere. You're changing, you have to recompile, restart, redeploy, all that. And that can be really tedious when you're doing that over and over, especially when you're writing a web application. So that's why lately with Spring Boot, the boot team has developed the Devtools, Spring Boot Devtools library, which hooks into your lifecycle when you're developing your application, and you can have a really nice experience. So I'll show you how you can use that. So I'm stopping the server right now to show you, and here's what you can do. You can add a dependency, and that dependency is Spring Boot Devtools. And whenever you do that, you're bringing in a library built by the Spring Boot team, and that library will reload your application without, will restart the right part of your application without restarting the whole thing, without restarting the server or the JVM. So you'll see how it works. So by adding that dependency, if I ever restart my server, I still get the same application. Nothing changed, right? Still here. The new thing is I can do something here. So I've got a developer. I've got a browser plugin, an extension, which is public. It's out there. It's called Live Reload. So Live Reload is in itself. It's some kind of protocol defined by third party, not by us. And Live Reload is basically a client, your browser, connecting to your server, and with a WebSocket, and whenever the server wants your client to just refresh, it's sending a signal saying just refresh the page. And that's third party, that's regular. And if you install that extension and you click on it, then you can see I'm connected. Because when I'm using Devtools in my application, Devtools is creating such a live reload server. So whenever I'm making a proper change in my application, the boot application will tell my client to just refresh, which cuts the whole lifecycle down to simple actions. Instead of restarting, stopping, etc., refreshing my browser, it's just, you'll see. So let's try it out with a few changes. What we can do for now is, for example, right now I've got a key which I know has been deprecated recently. So this one, Spring View suffix, it's been deprecated. And in my HTML, if I look in the HTML, I already have a class somewhere saying deprecated, but I didn't add a style. So what I can do is edit my CSS file and add something. So I can add a rule saying deprecated, and I'll decorate the text by adding a line through it. So whenever I rebuild my project, here's what happens. I'm not doing anything. It's being refreshed. The project has been refreshed on the server side, and it sent the signal to the client. And I didn't do anything on my browser. It's showing the change, which is the line here. So you might think, okay, this is a static file. That's an easy one. We can do something more complex. So the next step would be we can add, let's say, a banner, because someone in the room asked for it. So what I'll do with Spring Boot, you can add files which are banner. And if I add that banner in here, you can write any text you want. There are placeholders for your application version, etc. And it's even dealing with NC colors, which means that if you refresh your project, it's showing a nice little banner inside your console. So to give you more explanation on why we're seeing this right now, it's because whenever you're rebuilding your project, the Devtools library is watching files that of your project, and whenever you're rebuilding, it's doing the right thing. So if it's a static file, it's just swiping the right thing and sending the signal to your browser. If it's more complex, then for example, a template, it's recompiling if it needs. So let's do that. For example, we'll get a template. So for example, here in our application, we want to prevent all those keys to be displayed, like those groups where nothing changed. We don't want to see those. So let's do that. To do that, we need to go to the index to our div template. And in here, we've got our form, where we've got the versions and our compare button. So here we'd like to add some HTML. So I've got something for this, checkbox. So basically a checkbox saying whether or not I want to see the whole thing. So rebuilding, refreshing. All right, so I've got that new checkbox. It's not doing anything for now. So I'll like to get that signal from my form to my controller. So that's the next step. If I go to my controller, dealing with that form, so from version to version, and the model. So to get this, I'll just fast forward a bit into the presentation. All right. So right now I've got my controller with my form. So I've got a form object backing the whole form in my web application, and here I want to add the full flag, the flag I just added in my HTML template. So for this, I can do some change here. So I can add a model, add attribute. So here I'd like to know if it's full or not. So I don't have it right now, so let's add it. So do we have the full version of the diff or not? That's what we want to have. Here, so is, come on, config, no, that's not the one. Diff request, better. So is it full or not? Okay. And now instead of giving the whole diff and all the groups to our page to render, we just want to select the ones that where something changed, right? So here we'll get the groups instead, and we'll filter those. So this list of of, let me check this. So we've got the groups here, which are group diff. We've got the list of groups here, and we want to filter those with a predicate. So the predicate being, so is that group, did something change in that group? So diff type. It's a config diff type. So if something changed, then we don't want to see it. We want to see it. Or if we know that we ask for the whole thing. Okay, so by doing this, now we got the filtered list of our groups. We want to collect that to a list, and we're done. So by doing that, we should see a lot of things disappear in here. Okay, so we've got less things, right? We've got only groups where something's changed. And we made a change to an actual controller. So when we did that, we rebuilt the project, and what happened is Devtools took care of this. It restarted the Spring context, the Spring application context with the beans without restarting the whole JVM nor the container. So it's actually restarting pretty quickly. If we look at this in the run application here, I think we've got should have somewhere the time at the end. Here, it restarted in less than a second, and the JVM has been running for a while now because we started the presentation earlier. So okay, that's the kind of experience you can have when you're dealing with Devtools, from static resources to templates to actual classes, and you can do many things here. So another thing that can bother you when you're dealing with a web application is dealing with the static resources in many ways. So here I'm going to show you how to deal with this in a specific way. So for example, in this application, all the static resources, they're built there. We get them as web jars. So we're not copying and pasting those resources as just static files into resources. We have those specific paths. And if you look at the POM, then you'll see that we're getting jQuery and Bootstrap as Maven dependencies. So we're getting those which are jars, and those jars are on the class path of our application, web application. And Boot made those available in our, and we can serve those as static resources directly. So that's what we're doing. But the thing is, if you look at the actual page, when you're doing this, you've got to have the version, and you have to deal with this. So meaning, whenever you're upgrading the version of some static library, you have to deal with this also into your template. So both into your POM and your template. That's not really fine. So what we can do is in our POM, we can add another dependency, which is WebJars Locator. So that's a third-party library that Spring Boot supports. And this library helps you to locate those WebJars libraries without specifying a specific version, and it's doing the right thing. But that's a way to show you one thing. If I do that, I'm changing the dependencies of my boot project. And whenever I do that, I've got to restart. And I'm going to explain why. I previously explained that when you do something, when you rebuild your project, developer tools is restarting the application context, etc. But doing so, it's not restarting the whole thing, because it's creating two different class loaders at the beginning of your application. One for your app, everything related to the app, and one for the actual container and all the libraries that not everything that's not your code, basically. All the dependencies, everything that you've got in your POM, it's right there in that class loader, the first one. And the second one, whenever you're changing something to your code, that's the class loader that's being thrown out and restarted when you're doing something to your project. So that's why when you're adding something or deleting something from your dependencies in Maven, you have to restart your project. That's the only limitation, but that's a sane limitation. A very efficient way to restart very quickly without throwing everything out. So we've got that WebJars locator library, and that library will allow us to do something interesting with those resources. So instead of having those, we definitely want to get those resources without specifying the version. So here, what we'll do is create a specific customizer, because we're using Mustache as a template engine. You should know that with other templating engines, that feature is handled directly with no need of anything specific, but I'll show you that you can still hook into it. So here I'll create a Mustache customizer. So something that hooks into the Mustache templating engine and gives the possibility within the engine to add a new URL keyword, and that URL keyword will rewrite the URLs from the resources. So because we did that, we've got a new keyword into our templating engine, and so then and only then we can take care of this. So instead of writing all this, we could rewrite all links and have this. So if you compare, instead of having WebJars bootstrap the version, etc., I'm deleting the version and I'm just calling my URL keyword that I just created. And doing so and rebuilding, we'll see that it's still reloading or not, because I restarted the server. I don't know if it's still hooked into it. It's not showing the right thing. So the thing is, it's not loading the resources in our application because I don't know why. Oh, shit. Any idea? Yeah, maybe I didn't restart properly when I added the dependency properly. So okay, so if you look at this now, if you look at the source code, then you see that the versions are here, but in my template they're not. So that's one way of dealing with static resources as well. So okay, those are our first steps for a regular web application with the static resources with WebJars, for example. We've seen how to handle things with Devtools, how it changes the way we develop our application, our web application, and but we can do many more things actually. Here I'm going to switch to another type of application. So same application, but instead this application will be based on AngularJS. And you'll see. Reset. Okay, I've reset the whole thing. I've changed the dependencies. Rerunning. So here's an example of a different type of application. First, let me show you that it still works. So with 1.2.5 release, 1.3.0 release, same here. So here it changed. See, the browser is not reloading the page. We're fetching something with an API, with a REST API, and we're rendering the whole thing with the Angular templating engine. So the difference I want to show here is, okay, it's different. It's a single page application, but there's also a different way of structuring the application. Because see here, we still have our web module with same thing, controllers, etc. But this time, those controllers, instead of returning views, they're returning JSON here. And we don't have, we have a single template here. And that template is, and we'll see in that template, we've got ng views, all right? We've got Angular views. And we're getting a lot of resources with Angular, jQuery, etc. But all those resources and all those things, they're actually located in a separate module, in the client module. So previously, what we had, we were getting those dependencies, was those WebJar dependencies like jQuery and Bootstrap. We were getting those from Maven. And here, that's actually what we're going to do. But for our own code, instead of putting everything into SRC main resources in our web module, we'll have a separate module for that. So why do that? If you've built single-page applications, you often notice that you have okay, your code, also third-party libraries like module you're importing, and maybe tests, and maybe your own module system or your own build using Grunt or Gulp or anything. So if you add all that into your web application, that's a lot of cruft that you don't want. You just want the actual output of the build, and you want to serve that as part of your web application. So that's what we're doing actually. We have a client module with here, you can see Bower components, so third-party libraries. We're using Bower, and we're using npm to actually build our project. We've got a package.json. We're saying we need Bower, etc. And here in SRC, we've got our sources. So we've got our JavaScript and our CSS. So that's where our client application lives. And whenever we build this, we're actually calling, whenever we're building that module, we're calling Node in npm, installing those as part of a Maven plugin, and we're calling that as part of our Maven build. We are building our own client, and then we're creating a jar, just like a web jar, and that jar will be get as a dependency in our web module. So here we can see we're calling Node and npm stuff, and we are bundling everything into a jar on those resources. And if we look into the other module, the web module, you'll see that here we're getting the Spring the Spring Boot client module. So the client module is we're getting that as a dependency. But when you look at this, so two separate modules, it's good because we have our tests and everything we need for our client in a separate module. We're not mixing things, but it's kind of different from the usual layout, project layout, and that breaks a lot of usual things, you might say. But it's actually quite easy to make it work. So once you've got the jar set up like this, you might think that the whole Devtools experience I've shown you until now is totally broken. But we can actually work around this, and that's one of the great strengths of Devtools. So if we go to the application properties, right now we've seen just a couple of things we've added in previous steps. But right now we'll add a specific application.property for dev environment. So whenever you suffix your application properties files with something, a key, that'll be the environment. So whenever we run our application in dev mode with a dev profile, we're actually applying that properties file, and with Devtools we can hook into it, and we can add a few properties like this. So we can say first we want to serve specific locations, so everything that's on class path static, but also files that are located into the other modules directly on disk. So we're referring to the module next to us. So that's only during development phase. We're serving directly the resources from the module, from the next folder, instead of a jar. We don't need to rebuild the whole jar every time. So first step. And then for Devtools to understand what's going on, we're telling Devtools that it should take care of those additional paths. So Devtools should look at those paths with a file watcher, and whenever something changes, it should hook into it and with live reload, refresh your browser, etc. So those are the properties we've set. So it's not a lot, and with some kind of exotic layout we're devising, it can still work. So let's look at this. So it's already started. Let me refresh. Making project. So okay, we still have that application, still have that setup, we still have everything. And what we can see right now is whenever I'm calling this, there's a delay, right? Because we're making a REST call to our server, and it's rendering on the client. So we can see if we still have the same experience with Devtools. So for this, let's go to our new template. So within our new template, we still have our form with the from version, to version, and now we've got our button. We've got the button compare. So now what we can do is we can, for example, change the button. We can change the button and add some logo in it. So that's what we are going to do. So whenever we are calling this, now we have that logo shown. And because it's not super fun, then we can add, we can style it. So we can still, so that the previous step was in a template in our web application, and now that main.css file, it's in our client module, so different module. So here we'll see if everything still works. So here I'm adding a few CSS rules to change the style. So whenever I'm clicking on it, now the CSS applies. So by editing the file directly on disk, I still get the change instantly in my application, in the other module or in my main web module. All right, so now we've seen that with a different type of application, different layout, something that I think is more suited for single-page applications, having a separate client module with a build in itself. We can still have the same kind of life cycle and experience developing a web application. So as you've seen, being with Boot or framework, there are a lot of new features that help you to write those front-end heavy applications, how to handle those static resources in your templates, how to serve static resources from various locations, etc. And not only this, but also the main lifecycle, the development experience we have. And what we can also do is show the different things. So whenever you've got your application, you're working on your application, you also often want to optimize the experience and the web performance your users will have. So if you look at the network tab here, for example, so here's one thing. If you look into this, then we're calling our API. That's the API we're calling, and we're getting the data to represent the whole table of things. So the diff between those two boot versions for all of our keys. So if you look at it, it's actually quite big. It's almost 400 kilobytes just for one call, right? So we could definitely change that, and we can improve that. To improve that, we can leverage several features of Boot and framework, and I'll show you. So the first thing we can do is in that document, we're sending a lot of things, including things we don't really need to render on the front end. So that was when the templating was done on server, we didn't really care. Like, we can send the whole thing to the templating engine, and we're rendering just what we need. But for the client, if we're serializing the whole thing to the client, then that's a big payload, and that's a problem. So if we want to change that, we can select the right parts of the payload we want to see. And for this, we're sending this to the client whenever from our controller. Let's look at our controller. So whenever you're calling that API, you're getting this object, the configuration diff, and that configuration diff is that class, and that class has a lot of things in it. So there's a from and to version, but then the list of differences. If you look at those, then there are the IDs and property types. And if you look at those, there are a lot of other things, etc., etc. A lot of metadata out there. So that turns into a big document. And have you seen sprinkled here and there into that model, we've added JSON views annotations. And JSON views annotations, are you familiar with JSON views? JSON views is a feature in Jackson, the JSON library. So you can annotate your Jackson model, your model with those. And that's a way to customize the kind of output you'll get from serializing, depending on the context. So here, we've said we want this to be serialized only when I'm using that particular view. And we'll see how it works. So in the controller, if I'm still on the controller, I can say, okay, in that case, I don't want the whole thing. I just want to select what I've marked as a field, as a view. So if I'm adding the JSON view annotation, and then I need to use that particular view we've seen. So here with the div view summary class. So here, if I'm saying I just want to use that view, and then I'm refreshing, whenever I'm calling that API, here, we've gone from 400 to 246 because we've deleted a lot of stuff. So here, on the fly, when serializing the object, we're applying that specific view to that object, and we're serializing just what we need. Just one step, from 400 to 246. Then the next step would be, for example, when you look at this, you can see the response headers, and it's not even compressed. Like we totally forgot to enable compression. And usually when you do that, you have to fiddle with your container. You have to change your container configuration, set a lot of things, etc. But here we're using an embedded container, and we can even do that more easily by using the things we've described until now. So if we go to our application properties, here we can use compression, and there are a few keys. So if you type compression, you can see there's a server compression enabled, MIME types, etc., min response size. Those are all the things we can change here. So I prepared something. So here we've enabled the compression, and we want to compress everything JSON, text, CSS, and JavaScript. And we don't want to compress anything that's under 2K because it's not really, we think that it's not really useful in that case. So same thing, refreshing the whole thing, and now we've got the content encoding gzip. So we're really gzipping that response, and now we're down to 20K basically from 400 at the beginning. So that's great. We're now outputting less. We're now compressing on the fly, and now there are even more things that we can do using the latest framework features. For example, what's the best thing besides sending more to your client? It's sending nothing. And when you want to send nothing, it's about HTTP caching. So same thing, HTTP caching. You can do a lot of things in the latest Spring versions. There are many ways to deal with this. There are cross-cutting ways for your whole application, for all static resources, for example. But in our case, we want to tailor something really for our own API here. So, for example, when you're asking for the difference between version 1.2.5 and 1.3.0, we know that once those versions are out, we're not changing whatever. Once the version is released, we're not going on Maven Central and swiping artifacts, right? So when you do that, the diff is pretty much set in stone. So we could definitely use that, leverage that, and say, okay, that diff is the same once and for all, and in you clients, HTTP clients, you can cache it. And to do that, we'll definitely leverage the ETAG HTTP header. So the ETAG HTTP header is a way to put a tag on a response and saying that for that request, the response is this, and the ETAG is the identifier. And whenever the client has that response in cache, it can ask if the response is still okay with that ETAG. So we need to come up with some identifier, something that stands for the response, whatever happens. What we could do is use the two versions, the two keys, right? The from and to versions, concatenate those, and that could work as a key. That's what we're going to do. We'll create an ETAG with those keys. So we'll create an ETAG using the two versions. So we'll get the string from version and string to version, or just let's get the request all together in one shot, and then we can create an ETAG with this. We'll join then with a hash, and then we'll get the from and then the to version, and concatenating both should create somehow a decent ETAG. Now we need to leverage that one into our response. And to do that, you can, instead of sending back a configuration diff, the object that you want directly to serialize, you can send back a response entity of that object. And that way you can send that object but still customize the response in any way you want. So here, what we can do is return a response entity, and we want to set, we want to say it's okay. We want to add an ETAG on it, and we can create that ETAG with the diff request. Then we could even add some cache control on it. So I want to tell my clients that they should cache control this, that they should cache that response for one day, for example, or we could even go with 1 year. Once I'm done, I'm going okay and get that body here. And changing this should definitely add something new to our here. So to our response, now we have an ETAG saying this is the ETAG, and we even have the cache control directive to our response. So here I've disabled my cache, but if I don't do that, and I recompare, here we're going to see that it's getting now the response from cache. So it's not requesting the server anymore, because we have the ETAG, we have the cache control thing, so we're not even asking the server to do that anymore. So right, so now we've done a lot of things with caching and compression on top. I think we still have a few minutes, or not, 5, 10 minutes maybe? 5? So do you have any questions right now, or I can go a bit further by tweaking the client build? Questions or not?
There was a question from the audience for the app, how to include the Devtools locally but exclude them from the build.
Okay, so that's the question we usually have. Yeah, how to get Devtools but still exclude Devtools from the build and not have it in production. So it's done automatically for you. I mean, if you what I may have not done properly into my app, it's whenever you import Devtools, you should use optional first. And also, whenever you do that in your application, Devtools does actually it's enabled only if your application is launched in such a way, directly with Maven or into your IDE. But whenever it's launched as a executable jar, it's not activated. So you can still ship it if you want, but it won't be activated by default. Or there are other ways as well into your build to exclude Devtools whenever you're building the application with the Spring Boot Maven plugin. So you can say that you don't want to add all that dependency for production. Good. So one last thing that I can show then is to even go further with the build. So with the client, what I can do is actually now we've got our resources in our client module, but we could definitely totally build an optimized version of our of that application to even go further, like optimizing the CSS and JavaScript, and still come up with something with the jar, something that can be consumed but still optimized for production. And instead of doing that on the server side and juggling with things into your web application and mixing concerns, you can definitely leverage that separated module, client module, and do whatever you want in it. And that's what we're going to do. We're even going to use native tools that aren't really Java related, and that way you can do whatever you want. So to do that first, we can add more dependencies here. So here by default we've got Bower, but we could use gulp. So we're choosing gulp as a build tool. Gulp is kind of like Gradle in the JavaScript world, if you know it. And here we're adding that build tool, and we're adding things here to optimize the CSS and optimize the JavaScript. Once we've added those dependencies, we can use those and create an actual build file for our client application. So I'm creating a build file for gulp, which is called gulpfile.js. And here you can write that gulp file. So we're basically getting the dependencies we've added previously. We're describing the project to the build, and we're adding tasks. So just like Ant, we're saying, okay, here you need to get all the CSS files and optimize them on the fly and write those in a particular path in our target dist directory. And same thing for JavaScript, optimize everything on the fly and write that into target dist. So whenever we're building the application, we're launching all those tasks, and we're optimizing our resources. But to bundle the whole thing, to tie up the whole thing, we can use our POM in our client and change a few things. So right now, whenever we're launching the build, we're installing npm if it's not already there, installing third-party resources with Bower. And now we need to add another execution, which is, I don't know if I've got it already or not. No, I don't think. So I'm adding another execution here, which is gulp build, and I'm adding goals, and the goal here is gulp. So we're launching gulp whenever we're building our application as part of Maven. We have a third execution goal here. So now when we do that, we'll build all those optimized resources into our dist directory. So now we need to get those resources. Instead of taking whatever we have in source, we need to have we need to go to target and dist and take everything from it and get those resources and bundle them. So let's take a look at this. If I go into our client, if I let's package our application. So whenever we do that, we can see that it's launching node npm, the whole thing, a gulp. Then there's our gulp build. It's been minifying our JS and JavaScript files, etc. So meaning if we go back to our application, and this time we're launching the application, we'll make sure that the application is done like this. All right. Then I'm not sure I made the whole thing right. Yeah, good. So here, instead of having our main.css file, which is big, not optimized, etc., I have something that is optimized for my application for production. And if I ever switch back my profile to dev profile, then I can still serve the resources directly into my client module for the development experience with everything you need for development time. So that's a way to have both experiences and still have a a nice development cycle with your build application. All right, I think I'm done. Don't hesitate to ask questions about the whole thing, about web features, everything we've seen, Devtools itself, etc. How do we what? How do we handle heat tags for static resources? Yeah, so maybe we have like a minute. There are many other things as well that you can do. And there are a lot of things that I didn't have time to show you, but there's even the resource chain that is part of framework and that is leveraged in Spring Boot. And that way you can even, for example, do this. I'm going to enable it. And you can, for example, add a, let me show you. True. I think that'll work directly. Or not. No. It's not served from here. Yeah, I'm not sure it's right for cache enabled. Oh, you meant okay. Okay, so the other one. So whenever you want to Spring resources chain cache. No, that's not the one. Cache period. Spring resources cache period. That one. So, for example, if you want to do this, for example, cache resources for an hour for your resources, you can still have this, for example, app.js. And if you look at the headers, it's in no store right now because I'm in dev mode. But if I'm switching to production, then it'll show cache control, the cache control that I've set into the. Okay. How do you switch those profiles? So with Spring Boot, in here in my IDE, switching profile is about editing my run configuration and adding or deleting a profile here, dev or production or something like this. So that's here. And triggering a profile, it's triggering all the add profile beans in your application regularly, right? But it's also leveraging the application.properties or application-profile.properties. So you can. That's why I have a application-dev.properties, especially for dev, and for production, you can launch your application with flags and defining which profile should be activated in production when you're running in production. Sorry, how you? Yeah, there are many things. Actually, with properties in Boot, there's like a list of 10-ish ways to resolve a property. It goes from an actual value into your properties file, from the environment, from environment variable when you're launching or even a command line variable. So there are many ways to set a property, and when you're launching your application, for example, with an executable jar, you can tell it that it should load that property file from that place, from the file system, and it worked, and it works. Also, yeah.
That was all the time we have left for questions right now. If you have any further questions, please feel free to come up to the stage and discuss some things further. Don't forget to vote, and please join us in 20 minutes for Josh's talk on Spring Cloud. See you then.